Welcome to A Really Good Sex Chat, a podcast aiming to open up conversations about disability and sexuality. I'm your host, Candice Care-Unger, psychosexual therapist and specialist social worker at Care Rehab. Join us as we have frank conversations about sexuality, disability, fertility, pleasure, dating, and everything in between. This podcast is brought to you by Care Rehab and recorded on Darug land. On this episode of A Really Good Sex Chat, we meet with Jennie Williams, CEO of Enhance the UK, which is a user-led charity aiming to educate people of all ages about disability, as well as assist those with a disability in playing a full and active role in society. Prior to starting the charity, Jennie's background is in delivering care and support for people living with disability. And in this episode, we talk about ways in which support workers and support teams can facilitate sexual well-being. So let's get into the chat. I'm excited to have you with us, Jennie. Thank you for joining all the way from the UK and having this international conversation. For those of you who are listening, we do have a predominantly Australian audience, but for those who don't know you yet, maybe if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Well, it feels like a very international conversation because we've got a lag, we've got a delay, we've got internet problems. It feels like the early 2000s or something, doesn't it? We're like winding the computer up.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for having me. It's nice to say, I can actually say that I'm in sunny UK. It's actually really hot and I'm about to go for a sea swim, which most people in Australia don't think we ever do here. I'm very happy that I can say that this morning. It's actually happening.
Well, your morning, my night. The issue of sex and disability still remains relevant no matter where we are and what country we're in and what time of day and what season. It's definitely in the Australian setting, there's a lot of misunderstanding and myth, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK. So maybe if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about Enhance the UK and as a charity and what you guys do.
You're not wrong. I don't think that really there's any country that's got it right. I think we're a lot further on than we used to be. 15 years ago when I set the charity up, but dare I say, we're still hell of a long way. So hi, thanks. I'm Jennie Williams. As I said, I set the charity up, it was probably longer than 15 years ago now, but 15 years is kind of like stuck in my head. I don't want to get older, so I'm going to stick to 15 years because in my head I'm still like, in early 30s. Absolutely, evidently not. My background is social care, working in care homes. In fact, I worked in Australia, in Sydney as well, for various different care settings. I was looking in people's care plans, and there was nothing in people's care plans about people's sexual needs, sexuality, anything to do with sexual expression. But we didn't use the term sexual expression back then, so I wouldn't expect it necessarily to be called that. But even go so far as to say, what somebody's sexual orientation was, or even sometimes even if they've been married, or even if they had kids. So you would be going into a care setting and thinking, oh, here's a disabled person, end of that. They're not actually looking at whether anyone past and whether they've acquired their disability and if they were sexually active before, and if they weren't, do they want to be? Has anyone spoken to this person about it? So it is changing, but it's changing really, really slowly. And at the time, kept having very, very negative feedback from the management of the care settings that I was working, big care charities, disability charities. No, it's not appropriate. We don't talk about this. And why the bloody hell do we not talk about this? We should be talking about this. This is really important. It's important to you. So why is it not important to somebody else? So eventually I ended up setting up Enhance the UK. And because I wanted to challenge that stigma, I wanted people to be able to talk about it. I knew it was really important to me. My sexuality is important to me. My sex life is important to me. And when we talk about sex life, we're not just talking about sex can be a really subjective thing, can't it? It depends on what it means to that person. And quite often we think about sex and we think about penetrative sex, but that's not the same for everybody. And I knew it was affecting my mental health. It affected how I felt about myself if I wasn't having, or if I don't have that intimacy and that loving touch and that caring touch and all the rest of it. Again, that's not particularly right for everybody. Not everybody wants or needs that. But I know that I do and did. And I really realised that was affecting my mental health. It's got to be affecting other people's. So the charity was born and we, straight away we were massive stumbling block. People didn't want to talk to us. People certainly didn't want to fund us. We've never really had any funding for the charity. We've had very few donations in the early doors, but really small. And we've had to make our own money, which I'm fine about, and we're now, dare I say, one of the most successful disability awareness training companies in the UK. But actually, that's really important,
well done.
because there's no point educating non-disabled people and not doing it vice versa. So non-disabled people and disabled people have to be mutually, kind of inverted commas, educated in what accessibility means. So yes, as a disabled person, you feel really empowered and you want to go to a restaurant or you want to go to a nightclub, but you get there and it's not accessible. So that's useless. So you have to then look at the businesses and organizations and say, can we look? And again, access isn't necessarily just ramps. We know actually disabled people in the UK of wheelchair users is actually quite a small percentage. We're looking at attitudinal access, for one. And what if you've got a hearing impairment? What if you're neurodivergent? The list goes on. But coming back to Undressing Disability, which is the campaign for the charity, under that umbrella of a campaign comes a whole load of things, as you would know, from sex education. What does that look like? Early doors. A lot of disabled people who were born disabled never had any kind of sex education, or if they did, it was really poor. Or if you've acquired your disability, you almost need a new kind of education. You need to learn your body again, you need to experience your body again, you need to go through a grieving process and understand what it can and can't do. It's a big deal. It's re-educating yourself, and then maybe re-educating your partner or new partners and that come into your life. But you can't do that unless you know yourself what works.
So I understand that you guys are kind of disability, like your employees and your kind of workforce predominantly have disability as well. So it's a bit of lived experience meets corporate. How would you explain it? Like, where you're trying to bring, the lived experience into the educational setting, but also for the benefit of sharing clinical wisdom that you don't find in peer-reviewed journal articles, because so much of this knowledge hasn't to this date been well researched. And so a lot of it is really just amongst the community, and the community then sharing wisdom with other members of the community. So I'm just curious about your kind of like practice model, or what would you call it?
That's a really good point. So yes, absolutely, we are all disabled people that work for the charity, and that was really important. Again, when I set the charity up as a disabled person myself, that it's got, it has to be user-led experience. Now, when I talk about my disability, again, I say as a disabled people, quite often people's mind jumps straight to, oh, she must be a wheelchair user. Absolutely not. I'm not. I have a few different disabilities and they're all hidden. So for all intents and purposes, I look very non-disabled. And that's why we tend to not use able-bodied anymore, because I am able-bodied. I can go to the gym. I can go for a run. My body is quite able in many ways. It doesn't stop me being a disabled person. So just to let people know, I'm a hearing aid user. I've got moderate to severe hearing loss. I wear pretty powerful hearing aids. I'm a neurodivergent person, and I've also got a condition called lichen sclerosis, which affects my sexual function. Now, that actually, the irony, people joke now and say, Jen set this charity up for her future self. I didn't actually, as far as I know, it probably was happening before, but I wasn't actually diagnosed with lichen sclerosis until I was 39. And that affects my vagina, affects my vulva. It makes penetrative sex near on impossible for me currently. It can be very, very painful. And with that, I also get vulvodynia. So even simple things like sitting can be really, really painful for me. So actually, again, it's reevaluating what disability is, what that looks like, and why it's so important for us to have user-led experience, because we have a real mix of people within our charity. We have academics, we have doctors, we have occupational therapists, we have a real mix, but also we have who also have disabilities. So I'm not everybody, and I think that's really important as well. You have both sides, non-disabled people and disabled people working together, obviously. But for us as trainers and those who also go out and train people and teach, we're all disabled people. That's experience, that lived experience is part of educating. My comparison is I don't really see how it's the equivalent of a white person saying, this is what it's like to experience racism, as a black person. Well, it's not. You can
Mm,
only about what you think and you've heard and you've read, unless you've actually experienced it yourself. So that's why it's really important. Plus the other,
mm.
those of us who have been educated and got our kind of degrees or whatever in various other different things. But that is a key part to the charity is user-led experience. Yeah.
Mm. So when I first started doing psychosexual therapy and was retraining, like I told you, I was a rehab social worker for a long time, and I'd worked in neurological injury and people who had acquired their disability. And I was upskilling in the psychosexual therapy space and Googling lots of things to do with sex and disability, and Enhance the UK used to come up, particularly in those early days of my learning. And I'd go down the rabbit hole of your website, and, there was these interactive kind of almost like a message board or a chance for people to ask questions and get advice. And so there's that real community education component. And then there was these bloody fantastic videos. And there was one in particular that really stuck with me, Sophie's story. And, lots of people who attend the university classes that I teach have probably seen it. And it's one of those very powerful lived experience. It's probably 4 minutes, 5 minutes at the most. And so this is a plug for anyone who hasn't seen Sophie's story. Quickly Google it after you've listened to this episode. And I'm just curious around that whole campaign, sharing her lived experience and, one, how that came about, what you were hoping to achieve with it. And I think the thing that always comes out in the class in the room when I teach that is it really just blows people's minds around the barriers in care settings, having workers that don't want to text or don't want to help facilitate dating. And so there's lots of questions in that. One was how did it come about, and what were you trying to achieve with the campaign? And then let's talk more about care settings and how we can, if we're working with people, like support workers is what we would call them here in Australia. If support workers are working with people with disability, how can you help facilitate dating? What are your thoughts there, Jennie?
So we run something called the Love Lounge, which is a free service for disabled people or family members of disabled people that can basically write in, or now they can have a Zoom, which we hope the internet connection is slightly better than ours. And you have 3 3-hour sessions. Paula, who is Sophie's sister, and this was, a number of years ago, phoned me. And I have to say, as cheesy as it sounds, it's probably one of the most profound moments. I remember exactly where I was when I took that phone call. And she said, my sister has MS. She is nonverbal. She is now indicating that she wants to have sex, and she's using her eye gaze board. None of the carers will help her. She is indicating on the eye gaze board. She's saying things that doesn't sound like my sister. So she's saying things like, just a trigger warning for anyone who I'm going to swear and say things that people might not feel comfortable with, saying things like, I want to be fucked hard, I want to be bent over and fucked and slapped, and Paula was like, my sister, I've never heard her say stuff like this. And I said, do you think your sister really wants that, or do you think she's just trying to shock the carers, just scream like, just listen to me, I'm trapped here,
Yeah.
somebody shock them? And she said, do you know what, I don't know. She said, yeah, maybe, I've not really thought about it like that, but yes, maybe. And she said, carers are not touching this. They're not allowing Sophie. But as a sister, and I totally understand where Paula was coming from, do I stay in another room where I know a man could be touching my sister and she can't say no? If she's not enjoying it, how does she consent? How does she stop? Incredibly difficult. And actually something that I didn't have the answers for. But what I did say is, look, could I meet Sophie? And it was a really long way from where I was. It was about a 3-hour journey. And I said, how would it feel?
Yeah,
It
well.
was all coincidental, actually, and one of those things that were just meant to have been. I spoke to my friend who's a filmmaker, and I said, how would Sophie feel if we came down and we recorded her story? I've never done that before, and I have never done it since. And
Interesting.
he agreed and she agreed, and we went down and we filmed Sophie's story. And I mean, you guys can see a lot of what was in that film. And Sophie was saying, I don't want just to be fucked. I don't want to be bent over and slapped. That's the last thing I want. You don't see that on video, but that's the conversations that we had through her eye gaze board. Nobody is listening to me. I'm trapped in my body. I want to be loved. I want to get married. I want to have, that's what I want. I know I can't have kids, but ideally that's what I want. It's actually giving me goosebumps thinking about it now, because it was so bloody profound,
Mm,
for all of us. For her sister, there was lots of tears from all of us. Her
mm,
carers were like, up and that till that point, really not wanting anything to do with it. But actually, it was a real moment for me as well to go, I feel really sorry for these carers, because they've had no
mm,
training. They think that they're going to be breaking the law by helping and facilitating Sophie. I think they're good people, actually. They are good people, most of them. They just
mm,
don't know what to do. As a working as a carer myself, for many years, you don't have any training in this. So actually, it was
mm,
a real profound moment for everything. One, we need to be listening to people like Sophie, and two, we need to be helping care staff, and we need to be writing training. So from there, we went on to then make the film, and then we went on to write specific training, to which we then got accredited in the UK. And now we run that training for care staff, that they know that they have the legal backing, if you like, and the right training. Okay, well, if somebody wants to facilitate a sex worker, say, or get a sex toy, or have a partner stay in bed, most beds in care homes, certainly in the UK, are single beds, they're not double beds.
same.
So, what do I do? So all these questions, and actually, more importantly, getting a lot of people to reflect on their own comfort talking about sex and their own sex
Mm,
education, because a lot of the time it comes back down to them. They're like, I feel really uncomfortable talking about this. Okay, I get that. That's fine. But actually, this is part of your
mm,
job, and if you don't feel comfortable talking
mm,
about human orifices and liquid that comes out of our body, I think of all the liquid that you have to clean up as a carer, semen is like the least offensive, frankly. I'd take that over vomit
mm,
any day, or snot. Should I be doing this job? So the training has had a massive impact, but again, there's still really long way to go, because people don't see it as
mm,
important as moving and handling or health and safety, because it's not statutory. But from that, Sophie did actually go on to get a boyfriend, and she then went on to get married, and she died 2 years ago. But what I can say is, genuinely say this, Sophie died happily married. She died feeling loved,
mm,
and she died feeling heard and seen, which is, frankly, it's terrible,
mm.
shitty bit of life for her. It was no point beating around the bush with it. It was her end goal was that, and she did achieve that, which is huge.
And left a massive legacy. You think about, I mean, there'd be well over 1,500 students that would have seen that, here in Sydney anyway. So, you kind of think from what sounds like a bit of a impulsive film opportunity, not only kickstarted a whole training program that could be inspired by it, but it's also kind of been a really useful tool for us to reflect on our values and attitudes around sex and who's allowed to be sexual, and why we, really maybe are more uncomfortable, particularly with folk who have no verbal communication. And this whole question of consent comes up a lot in our work too. Like, if people can't say the words NO or YES, then how do you communicate yes or no? And I'm like, well, actually, she is communicating consent in many ways. And so we can kind of have, these really nice conversations around all the ways in which we say yes without using the words YES out of our mouth. We might use them with our eyes, or we might use body language, but this issue of consent comes up a lot. Going back to the support workers and the training and the kind of aha moment that you had there, what are your tips for support workers who may be working with someone who has a dating goal and they're thinking, oh my God, where do I start? Where do you guys start with supporting the support workers?
What happens is, in care role in general, we talk about safeguarding. That's the key buzzword, isn't it? Safeguarding.
Mhm.
And there absolutely has to be safeguarding. There has to be safeguarding for the disabled person, and there has to be safeguarding for the staff. We all agree that. But what we see time and time again, and more often than not, that we are putting in the most restrictive option. And quite often is that nothing is happening. So when we think we're
Mm,
not breaking a law, what actually we're doing is we're breaking other laws by trying to uphold a law. So by putting the most restrictive
mm,
option in, then we're breaching somebody's human right. And that's not right. So actually, we've got to be thinking in a lot of scenarios. First of all, you have to safeguard yourself. There has to be a policy. Your care home should have a policy. If it doesn't, why not? Check it. Even whether it's a care agency, it should have a policy. If it doesn't, it needs to. It's so important. It's an integral part. There should be clear guidelines and how you adhere to that policy. There's no point having the best policy in the world and nobody knows about it. then looking at implementing that policy and making sure that everything you do is recorded, you are covering your back, you're speaking to your manager, but actually looking at what does that person want, having those conversations with that person. If you're not comfortable having that conversation, find somebody that is. Just leaving it because that's not
Mm.
comfortable to you isn't right. But then looking at what can we do so we cannot put the most restrictive option in there. We can put other options. But first of all, quite often people come to us and say, somebody wants a sexual experience, say. And my question back to that care will
Mm.
be, well, with who? How do they identify sexually? Are they
Mm.
straight? Are they gay? Are they bi? Are they non-binary? Oh, I don't know. Haven't had that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty good way to start. And what does sex mean to that person? Are we creating an atmosphere within our care setting, whether it even be in someone's home if we're carers going in? Bearing in mind, I've got to say, obviously, not all disabled people have carers. Obviously, I don't. But we're saying at the
Yeah.
moment we're
Yeah.
talking for this purpose, right? And creating this atmosphere that is encouraging these conversations, getting in the LGBT plus community involved, whatever that may look like, because there is internalized stigma and shame. We know for lots of people, oh God, people got to deal with my disability. Now they've also got to deal with maybe I'm LGBTQ plus. How do I start with that? Let alone talking about kinks and fetishes. No way, So it's about really working with care staff and saying, if you don't feel comfortable, why do you don't? Why are you not feeling comfortable? Let's address that
Mm.
problem rather than just going, well, let's just leave it then. Because it could be really simple as somebody saying, I don't know, I've never had sex education myself. Well, should we look at that for you? But what I
Mm.
will say is that if people are bringing religion into it, you cannot put your own values onto your work practices. What we need to be doing is we need to be working with facts. And what we see so often is people don't work with facts, they work with values. And that's not a place for
Mm.
caring. It has to be down to what is the law and what is facts and what's in the policy. And actually, if you can't separate the two, really kind of going, is this the job for me? Is this the industry in the area that I should be working?
Mm.
And that should be key for interviewing somebody, which is just as important as can you wipe someone's bottom or can you administer medication? To me, they are equally as important because it's affecting someone's mental health, as I said, as much as everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point. I've got a lot of clients who have like a 24-hour care program, and they'll sort of identify the more sex positive, open minded supports. And that doesn't mean that the other supports don't still have a role. They're like, oh, they're actually really good at like the best cook. I really enjoy the food that they make, or I enjoyed this person's company when we're doing this particular activity because they're also really good at it. Or I like this person's driving, it's way more safe. And so, different people have different roles on the team. But what has kind of started to come about is I have clients who are like, well, my more sex positive support only works on a Saturday. So that kind of means I can only like be set up with my toys on a Saturday. And I think that's where like the big issue is. It's like these are stuff that people who don't have support workers in their lives just don't even think about. And so when I'm coming like into the classroom or when I'm working with health professionals, it's like it's one thing to say, cool, we've got one sex positive staff member on a 24-hour rotation shift. But I don't think people understand how limiting that is on people's access. And so these are all the things that are going through people's minds. Clients who are like, I'd love to see a sex worker, but I'm really afraid to be judged by my workers and I need them and I don't want to disrupt the apple cart here. And so it's sort of like, how can I access a sex worker, but also have some privacy from my carers? I mean, that in itself is a whole other issue to navigate. And, sex work's decriminalised in Sydney or in New South Wales. So, there's no law issue here. It's a values issue. It's a perception of being judged. And some of the work that I do with the support work agencies is more around understanding the difference between law and values and where to from here, so that way they can be quite clear about the way that their inadvertent judgment comes across and limits the people that they're trying to support. Because for many people, they don't mean to do it. It's just they are doing it. So I guess we've covered a few things here in terms of agency training and supporting and what you guys have been doing in terms of, I guess, trying to capacity build the industry. And I'm sure you've got similar issues in the UK to Australia where we just need a lot more support workers than we can recruit. So sometimes the cream of the crop might not always be, you still need more, So sometimes we have to take the next layer as well. Other than recruitment and training, what do you think are some of the important, interesting events that Enhance the UK has been involved with the last couple of years?
One of the things that you just covered then was essentially, masturbating, and something with privacy, right? When we talk about masturbating is like the ultimate secret thing, isn't it? Like, it's something really private. It's not something that you go, we call it a cheeky little wank, you're gonna go, I'm gonna masturbate. Oh, do you know what? Before I do that, I'm gonna send it. So put it in a WhatsApp group and WhatsApp 20
Yeah.
people, and they can all have a discussion, and then they can let me know
About if it
whether
can
they
happen or
think it's
not.
appropriate or not. And then they can actually go, no, you can't masturbate now. You have to do it next Tuesday because that's the only time that we're happy. Do you know what? I've lost the mood now. So linking on
Yeah.
to that with masturbating and all the rest of it, so, it's true. It's who are we to say that? Sex toys then comes into that, and rocks off a company contacted us. It was a long time ago now. It was 7 years ago, and contacted us and said, we want to make an
Wow.
inclusive sex toy range. And I said, okay, that's brilliant. What does that look like? And they started talking about the sex toy. And then I went back to everything that we've just spoken about. Okay, so how does somebody order that sex toy? Because in most care homes, there's a child lock on the internet, there's a firewall. So how does somebody get on your website? So even if they manage to get on your website and they can order it, how do they open the cellophane on the box? Then how do they open the box? Then how do they read the information that's on the box? What if they've got a visual impairment? What if they've got poor dexterity? How do they physically open the box? How do they charge it up? Because they're really fiddly, etc., 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 etc. And Rocksoft went to their credit. They went, oh God, we've never thought about that. And we said, yeah, it's quite a lot to think about. It took a really long time. COVID kicked us in the butt, as
Oh,
my 5-year-old would say. It really did, and everything was really hard work because everything shut down. We were having focus groups, and then the physical focus groups had to go to online focus groups. Something would be sent back, the handle wouldn't be right. I mean, I've got a box under my desk as I speak now. It must have like 50, 60 prototypes, because something would be sent and would be like, the handle's in the wrong place. So it was really, really hard work. But essentially, what we came up with Rocksoft was the packaging, which is really, really important, that was accessible, so you could open it with your teeth, you can shake it out with one hand, everything is wrapped up is in tissue paper, so you can rip that open with one hand or your teeth. Charging is really far away, so it snaps with a magnet. There's one tiny bit of braille on there, but then the QR code underneath, so somebody with a vision impairment can use their iPhone to read it out. The information's in BSL, but for us, British Sign Language. For deaf people, all the information's in plain English, so if you're neurodivergent, there's not shed loads of information you're trying to take in. We really did try and think of all the information as much as we can, to then, even before you get to the toy, and then you get to the toy, okay, and for this particular part of the range, it's an ongoing thing. This was very much about thinking about Sophie, thinking about people like Sophie. What if you've got poor dexterity? What if you can't hold something yourself? So we came up with, my big thing was, I want buttons that somebody can hold and they can press with their nose, their chin, their eye, their ear, and start it. Here, the law is that you can place a sex toy as a carer. You cannot insert it into a vagina. You cannot put it on an erect penis, and you cannot be in the room while somebody's masturbating. You have to be out. So we wanted to set that up so that setup could be so, and then the carer could leave. That person can have their intimate time, and then once that was done, that they could, put that down and have as much privacy as one can possibly have in that scenario. So a hell of a lot of thought went into it. And then the range is going to be an ongoing thing with toys that need, less support than that, because cost came into it as well. Cost is really, it's inaccessible for a lot of people. And my big thing was, I don't want it to be really expensive. Equally, when you're making something that's really big and got loads of elements to it, of course it's going to be pretty expensive. But what I will say is, we ran a love lounge the other day, a free love lounge. A guy he's actually got learning disability through having many, many seizures. He had to go to hospital, get a bullet removed from up his anus because he put something that wasn't fit for purpose. He had lost loads of blood. He was really bad weight. And then his carer was lovely, actually. She called us and I said, right, can you show me all the sex toys you've got? There must have been about
Mm.
300 quid's worth of sex toys there. None of them were fit for
Yeah,
purpose.
right.
So I was like, and so part of the thing, again, it comes back down to educating, doesn't it? It's like going, right,
Yeah.
what do you want this sex toy for? Which body part do you want it on? What can be right by you? And actually getting that one toy that can last for years and years and years and years, as long as you clean it and look after it properly. And that's part of the education as well, cleaning it and looking after it and using
Mm.
lube if you need to, etc. So it's called Quest. The sex toy range is called Quest, and you can find it on our website or the Rocks Off website. And then part of the money that is made from that goes back into the undressing campaign, which then allows us to run things for free, like the Love Lounge surgeries. It's an ongoing quest, I'd say, to keep these toys coming out. But I feel really lucky and privileged we work with Rocks Off, because they've got integrity, which is the key for me for working with people and partnerships.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, have watched and observed from a distance, have struggled to get them to Australia. So maybe that could be the feedback to Rocks Off, is like, make your international shipping a little bit quicker. But other than that, I think, like, from a distance, without having been able to touch or hold or, criticize something to actually have in my hands, you go, it looks like it's got some really good potential. I mean, the assistive tech, we call it assistive technology, in Australia, and our national injury insurance scheme will fund assistive technology when it's injury related, or if it's, going to help facilitate, more independence, and if it's, reasonable and necessary is the language that the NDIS likes to use. And our other third party insurers will fund assistive technology. And I've looked at a lot of their equipment and thought, there's some potential there. So hopefully they can get into the Australian market a bit easier, particularly around the hand grips and the buttons. They're, for people with the hand, the strength, as well as, once something starts vibrating, a lot of, particularly that population that have like that neurological hand, it's like once it starts vibrating, it's gone. You can't hold on to it anymore. So there's a few features on it that I thought have been very cool. So I would love to be able to have that in our suite of resources here. Accessible sex toys is an ongoing conversation, and the buttons and the voice activation and the linking to apps and the linking to home automation, and if it can talk to Google Home, all is good. And that is definitely the types of features that we're looking for in a lot of our accessible sex toys. It's great that you've been able to get such a big corporate organization on board to be addressing this issue. The Rocks Off campaign was awesome. The Love Lounge is a wonderful resource, not only for people with disability, their families, but also health professionals working in the area that maybe want to upskill on what are some of the common interventions or recommendations from people with lived experience. How can people help? How can people support, even from all the way over here? Because I know lots of people that have used the resources online. So what's your plug to Australians who are listening right now, or anyone who's listening right now?
Do you know what? It's a very simple plug, actually, and ask. It's on our Instagram, is undressing disability. And it would be really great for people just to follow us on Instagram, to share the work that we do, let people know that a lot of the stuff that we do is free, let people know about the Love Lounge. I mean, obviously, if anyone ever wants to fundraise for us, we will never say no to that. But actually, the ask isn't money. It's letting people know who we are, and actually letting people know that they're not alone, and they're seen and they're recognized and they're valued. And that just because it might be that you think, well, actually, I don't know, it might be something like, I've got Crohn's disease, but that's really affecting my confidence because of my bowel movements, that's really affecting the intimacy that I have with somebody, but I don't feel disabled enough to have that conversation. If it's affecting you and that's affecting your mental health and it's affecting your sex life, then the definition of disability here is something that has a long-term negative effect on your day-to-day ability to do daily tasks. And I think, intimacy and sex should be part of that, or having a fulfilled life. So just to let you know, it doesn't mean that we're talking again on this podcast about people who have very, severe and specific disabilities and dexterity issues, etc. But it's not just, it really is for everybody. And like I said, family members as well, or partners, because the effect that it can have on you is huge as well. You've gone from somebody who was your sexual partner and being to somebody that you now taking on this carer role. What does that look like for you? And knowing that you need that support as well. So it really is just about, if people could follow us on Instagram on Undressing Disability and share and let people know, that'd be great.
Spread the word. We never know who also happens to have a rich cousin or friend or has inherited something amazing and want to share the love as well. That's always good, like sharing
Yes.
the resources around. I think I've kept my fangirling massively under control. So I'm going to give myself a gold star on that one. But I also just want to say a huge thank you, Jennie, for your time tonight to be able to talk about the work that you guys do at Enhance the UK and some of these broader issues on attitudes and support work and training needs, and just reflecting on Sophie's story and that whole campaign that has found its way all the way over to Australia and definitely has made a massive difference and is a wonderful reflective tool to help people think about their attitudes and values around sex and disability. And just want to, I guess, offer some encouragement from across the ditch to say, bloody well done, keep up the good work. I'm sure this level of activism has its toll and the work you do makes a massive difference. So this is my cheerleading from afar, but also want to say thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us on this episode today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's really kind. Well, I think I've kept my fangirling under control, so I think that's more well done me, actually. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you, and thanks for playing the video. And as you say, that to keep Sophie's legacy going is a huge. I mean, what an accolade to one's life. So I really thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today in this episode of A Really Good Sex Chat, and a huge thank you to Jennie Williams for her time and for all the work that they're doing at Enhance the UK. If you've enjoyed this Really Good Sex Chat, please like us on Spotify and share us with a friend so other people can find this podcast as well. Until next time.